Okay, the March 13th, 2017 meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education is called to order at 6:30 p.m. Mrs. Wick, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Feeney. Present. Mr. Uphaw.
Present.
Ms. Flanagan. Present. Mr. Raymond.
Here.
Mr. Kraus. Ms. Maidson. Here. Mr. Zock.
Present, and Mr. Kraus had indicated to me a month ago that he had a scheduling conflict for tonight and wasn't going to be here, so.
Okay.
I have proof that the board has a quorum. I have proof that the meeting has been properly noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law, and that notice will be with Mrs. Wick if anyone wants to see that. I'd like to make a revision to the agenda tonight. We were to meet as a board committee of the whole, and Brian was going to lead us through exercise regarding the budget, and Brian has been home all day, and his preference would be if we would defer that to our next meeting, and so we will defer that to our next meeting, unless there are any strong objections to put him through that. So I would seek a motion to approve our agenda tonight without having the board committee of the whole meeting.
I so do move.
Gwen makes that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Jeff seconds it. Any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We have an agenda. Consent calendar is before us. Does any board member have anything that they wish to remove from the consent calendar tonight? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the items on the consent calendar?
So moved.
Charlie with the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Barpini with the second. I would note that under donations, we have a $300 donation from Brooke Painitz to Brooklyn School for the Green and Healthy Schools Initiative. Looks like Alicia Fisher won the Box Top for Education Customer Service grant, right, Shannon?
Yeah.
Terrific, so you get $10,000 through that. Would you thank her so much for us, and terrific, and so that's going to OMS. And is there any designation for that? Shannon? Any designation for that?
Not yet. I think we're gonna sift through all of our referendum projects and see where we can best utilize that.
Great, thanks. Hey, Dan.
Hey.
I excused you because I thought you weren't going to be here
Oh, no, I'm here.
from a while ago, so.
Sorry.
Welcome. And then we have a donation from Ann Stone who donated a treadmill to OMS. So we have a motion and a second regarding the consent calendar. I don't think there are any contracts on there, are there, Janie? Okay, we can do that by voice vote. All in favor signify by saying aye for the
Aye.
consent calendar.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? None. Motion carries. Pursuant to Board Policy 180.04, the board has established a period of time for the community members to address the board. Janie, is any member of the community registered?
No.
Is there any member of the community who wishes to address the board here this evening? I don't see any, so we'll move on to item C, information items, OEA report. Jen, anything?
No.
Nope. You're the observer. Student report. Hi, Tessa.
Hi.
What you got for us?
Okay, so I wasn't here last meeting, so I wasn't able to report this, but I did finally end up meeting with Mr. Raymond. We talked about some of the potential changes to the school day and like schedule changes and things like that. And I did send some information, kind of like a more detailed report. And I think that it's definitely worthwhile to consider some of the points that I did bring up. So I don't know if he will end up showing that to the committee at all, but that is out there. So also I'm currently working on a very big project right now for student council, and I'm leading the senior class to help make the Let's Make a Difference week that I've talked about in previous months happen, and that's going to be happening April 17th through the 21st. And I've been very busy these past few weeks, kind of like coordinating with local businesses, teachers, and members of our community, just to kind of make sure that this all runs smoothly, and it's going to be very exciting, so I'll report more on it in the future. But
Anything we could do to help?
I will get back to you on that.
Just let me know.
I will,
okay?
absolutely.
So if you do, we'll put the word out on the board.
Great.
Okay.
I'll let you know. Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope, that's all I have for
Great.
tonight.
Thank you very much, Tessa. Information item number 3 is Association of School Administrators Conference Update, and that's Brian, that's you. And
Yes,
Brian was at the School Administrators Conference a couple weeks ago, and
Steve
I
and
asked him
I,
to bring him a report.
Steve and I had a conversation, and I said I could provide a quick top 10. They're not necessarily prioritized, but a quick top 10 of items that I learned at the conference. The AASA is the National Association for School Superintendents. It typically has about 4,000 to 5,000 people that attend. And this is a conference, this particular session was from a small public school in Amboy, Illinois, which I'm gathering from if I've gathered correctly, it's just over the border by Rockford. And a very small school district, and they were talking about personalization. One of the reasons I went to their workshop. And this falls under the category of student engagement. And it made me sad that 58% of students said they've never been asked what they thought about school and education. And it really caused me to think about our climate and culture survey and the need for us to spend more time engaging students. Also, the second question, what would make school more fun, interesting, and meaningful? And I'm guessing you would generate these ideas in your head as well. Being more project-based, 43% of the students would like to work at their own pace. And part of this particular workshop just made me think of how often and how necessary it is for us to do engagement with our students. This slide I pulled from a different workshop on student engagement, and it was a conversation actually with a gentleman from New York. And he and I were talking as the presentation was going on, which didn't make us fully present, but I was interested in what they were doing for student engagement. And one of the questions, or these were 3 questions that he asks their students every year. What are 2 or 3 important things to you as a student? What can we do better for you? And what are 2 things we should stop doing, continue doing, or start doing? If you're familiar with some of Jim Collins' work, the last question is from his work. My second item, my second takeaway was branding. Everywhere I went, in every conversation that I had with districts, everyone was branding. And it really brings to mind our work with the strategic plan, the brochure that we put together earlier, and the fact that branding has just become an integral part of how schools operate. The third takeaway, apologize, this is a photograph that I took on my phone. I'll explain it to you. It was one of the speakers, and he was talking about the similarity. This is one of the guests, the general session speakers. He was talking about the connections between millennials and baby boomers. And if you just look at the top line is millennials, the bottom line is baby boomers, and it almost tracks perfectly. And for those of you that can't read it, the top section says having fun is the first category. The second category is making a difference. The second category, or the third category, is friends and families. The fourth category is making money. And the last category is professional successes. And part of the message from this general session speaker was the schools of tomorrow are really going to be filled with millennials. And from a human resources standpoint, we are going to need to figure out how to attract, retain, and develop millennials. Not that Generation X or baby boomers like me aren't important.
It's very similar.
Yes, it matches perfect.
Yeah, I mean,
I was very surprised when I saw that.
What was the question here, Brian?
He was just doing a compare-contrast. This general session speaker was a Generation X person, and his point, when you look at millennials today, 17 to 35, and that's about over 50% of our staff right now, we are going to need to design a school system with school pay with opportunities for millennials that kind of match that. And the key part from his perspective was, making a difference. Where that's not quite as big with Generation Xers, although if any of you are Generation Xers, you could correct me on that. So it's an interesting piece of data, how everything is cyclical and how the baby boomers are making
So
a
this has
return.
nothing to do, my understanding then is, just to clarify, is that this has everything to do with prospective hires down the road rather than what students are thinking.
Correct. This is
Gotcha.
all about adults.
Okay.
Was the point he was making that the baby boomers 20 years ago had the same values as the millennials did today, and as they got older, their values changed somewhat, and the inference being that we might see that happen with the millennials? Okay.
I guess we're just human.
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation. Here's another piece. The general session speaker is sitting in the middle of these students, and he does a lot of visits with public schools across the country. And I took a picture of this, and I thought it would resonate with all of you as board members. It's not what students know, but what they can do. And he talked about creating in the arts, navigating in the sciences, and communicating in the humanities. Again, a very big picture perspective of education. Off to number 4. This is from a district in Arizona, Dysart, Arizona. And there's a group, I'll show you information from a group called Ed Leader 21 in a couple of slides down. But they've identified a profile of a student based on their profile of a graduate. And I think we had a profile of a student. We had a profile of a graduate long before anyone called it a profile of a graduate, which were really our exit outcomes, which was pretty interesting work considering that was done in the 1990s. And again, just to go kind of clockwise, what Dysart, large school district, probably 35,000 kids, critical thinking, communicator, creative, being tech literate, collaborator, self-directed, and global citizen. And then they provided, this is the group I was talking about, the profile of a graduate from Ed Leader. Since I was at the workshop, I was able to get a free download of Profile of a Graduate Builder. And I'm going to work with a few administrators just to tinker around with that. And this is a little harder for me to read, but you can pick out of their profile probably 25 different items that you can develop your own profile of a graduate. And it's free because I was at the workshop. Here's another piece that was fascinating. Again, Dysart School District in Arizona. They had a profile of a teacher. And I think the number of times that Leslie and I get the question from teacher candidates, so what are you really looking for as a teacher? And this really struck me. I brought back a copy. I'm going to hand it out to all the administrators. Again, this is their work, not our work. I'm not advocating their work, but the concept of thinking about what's the profile of a teacher that we're looking for in our interview process when, in a typical year, I'm guessing we will do 150 interviews before school starts. So profile of a teacher is number 5. I forgot which workshop. It's only 2 weeks ago, but I've already forgotten which workshop I pulled this from. But the question really stuck with me. What is the North Star of our work? And to me, it's all of this. It's our student achievement report that we provide to the board as well as to the community. And I think a great question for us to remind ourselves of as we're weighing through budget issues, as we're weighing through potential changes in the district. Number 7, sorry for the bad photo on this. You've all heard college, career, and community ready. AASA has been working with a number of superintendents across the United States on redefining ready, and redefining ready in terms of career ready, life ready, and college ready. I attended a workshop on this. There are probably 10 to 15 different benchmarks under career ready, life ready, and college ready. And some of the things would be traditional with, your grade point average, the number of AP classes you've taken. Community service. It wasn't too long ago that we did not have a community service component to our high school graduation, which I think is a critical life ready skill. So I can share some more information on that, but that was takeaway number 7. Ed Leader 21, that's the group that I mentioned. They happen to be from Arizona, and they've been coming to the conference for the last, I'll say 10 years, and I've started working with them at the conference. Whatever work session they have, I always go and attend because I've learned so much from this Ed Leader Group 21. They currently have about 1,000 districts nationwide that participate in one element or another, and their 4 big pieces are 21st century education tools and resources, innovative 21st century education projects that we could become part of a network with, network and collaboration opportunities, again, work going back and forth on special interest areas like personalized learning for us. And then they also do some work on professional development. And interestingly, they have 4 C's of Leadership Academy. Whoops, I want to go back. Item number 9 is, I don't have a slide on it, and it's education and equity. I spent the first day at the conference at a pre-conference workshop, and the pre-conference workshop was sponsored by a group called Equal Opportunity Schools, and on their brochure it's upgrading learning, closing gaps, and transforming lives. And this was, in essence, our equity. Our equity goal. And one of the key areas is generating more student interest in programs like AVID. I think you're all familiar with AVID, and Leslie attended an AVID conference, I think in December, and that's a program that we're looking at. Also, getting minority students into AP classes and sort of changing that cycle and getting more of our minority students in AP classes. It's part of closing the gap theory, and we are not alone in this quest on educational equity. I had an opportunity, one of the districts that was featured, I knew this superintendent when he was in Menominee Falls in the Milwaukee metro area, and now he is outside of St. Louis. And it was interesting to see other systems, all different sizes, big, larger districts than us, smaller districts than us, or districts our size, working on educational equity. And then this is a concept I shared at the leaders meeting last Thursday with Steve, Tracy, and Diana. A good friend of mine who was the superintendent in District 214, Arlington Heights in Illinois. He was a longtime superintendent in Wisconsin, and the way District 214 is set up, it happens to be all high schools. So he has about 10,000 high school students, and in one of his presentations, he tossed out an item that they build into their school calendar, so it made me think of Gina right away. And I personally love this idea. I think it's something for our principals to talk with their school leadership teams about. And the concept, I think it would be hard to find someone arguing against the concept, but it's homework holidays and school calendar. And the notion of having homework holidays and school calendar is to give our students some stress-free breaks that they can count on through the year, and stress-free breaks that parents can count on through the year, so that while we're doing school every day, we also want to take a couple of breaks. This just happened to model what my friend Dave had in his local district, which was homecoming weekend, Thanksgiving break, winter break. They selected a February weekend, just because of how long January, February, and March is, and then spring break. I guess you could include prom too. Maybe you have 6 homework holidays. So I was really struck by that and how that would help our students, you know, manage their classroom life. Because if they have no homework and someone provides them homework, it's a little bit of a stress in one of those areas. Or if they have a big project during one of those times, A, it's a great opportunity to catch up on the project, but B, it also adds to the stress of being a student. So I tried to look at it from the eyes of a student. So those are my top 10 takeaways. I wish I had a few more slides, but I was home today, so this is what I put together Friday, and I've been under the weather since late Friday and haven't had an opportunity to update it. Any questions?
Dan, anything for Brian?
Nope.
Gwen?
I was curious about the first slide that you showed, where students were never asked about, 42% of students were not asked about what they thought about school and education.
58% in this
58.
particular district.
Right, and I think we did pretty well here, don't we? I mean, I think there's a lot of discussion going on,
Yeah.
and Tessa, that would be your field that question.
Yeah, a lot of, I know that throughout the year, it's like we fill out at least one like super long like survey monkey thing, and like
Yes.
we put in all of our feedback about it. And I know that throughout our advisories, we discuss like a bunch of different topics about what we think of district policies, just all sorts of stuff.
Right,
So
and I would like to reiterate, I think that Oregon School District does a great job with that communication.
as a student, I definitely feel heard.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Barb?
I was curious, at the 43% of students who would like to work at their own pace, that seems low to me. And it'd be just interesting to know if that's a perception issue. That
Yeah, this was a small district, and they were
Right.
just sharing their data.
Yep.
They probably have 12,000 students, and they're into personalization, and they're also into one-on-one initiatives.
Interesting.
It just struck me, you know, to underscore the importance of us having conversations with students.
Right.
And as Tessa mentioned, I think we are close to 20 years of using either a DPI survey for parents, for students, and for staff every year in the district, which I think is great, but it just underscores the importance. I would feel sad if I were in this district and almost 60% of the kids said they've never been asked about their school experience. Actually, I'd fix it, is what I do.
Anything else, Barb? Krista? Jeff? And I don't have anything. Thanks, Brian. Oh, Charlie?
Yeah, Brian, what your presentation sort of brought to mind for me, so reflecting back on the experience I had when we were chaperones for a choir tour that took kids to New York, and they performed on stage at Carnegie Hall. And it occurred to me that it would be great if every kid in high school at some point during their career had what I call a Carnegie Hall experience. Something that really opened their eyes to a world of possibilities beyond, I think, what they normally would be exposed to. For some, it's going to be in the arts. For some, it might be athletics or other kinds of, or science, or languages, or international trips, as we've seen more recently. But I just think those kind of experiences can be so transformational that it really would be great to think about how we might make sure that every kid at some point in their high school career has at least one of those kinds of experiences that really opens them up to a wider world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The Carnegie Hall or mountaintop experience for every student to have that as prior to graduation is important.
Maybe we can make part of a graduation requirement.
And that would be a good discussion with calendar.
Thank you, Brian.
You are welcome.
Okay, we're gonna move on to our one action item tonight, and that is the extension of the superintendent's contract and report on evaluation. The board, at its last meeting on February 27th, completed 3 sessions of closed session evaluation of our superintendent. We evaluated Brian on the initiatives that we had talked about in our May 2016 board in-service, and that was visioning in the new board paper, our personalized learning initiative, teacher compensation referendum, and educational equity, and the evaluation reflected we'd made significant strides on all of those, and so that was very positive. We also discussed other aspects of superintendent's performance in broad categories of administration and management, instructional leadership, relationships, mission, vision, leadership, and personal characteristics. At the conclusion of our meeting in closed session on February 27th, the board addressed a question of the extension of Dr. Bussler's contract. He had a 2-year contract that ran through June 30th of 2018, and the board in closed session voted to extend that contract through June 30th of 2019, and we decided at that point it would be appropriate to have that motion in open session as well, and so that's on the agenda for tonight, and the motion would be to formally extend Dr. Bussler's contract through June 30th of 2019, so I'd entertain that motion.
I move to extend Dr. Bussler's contract to June 30th of 2019.
Second.
And a second from Gwen. Is there any discussion? I would just note that I will work with Gina to formalize the written contract after this vote. It would also include the standard language of a right to extend the contract through 2020 with proper evaluation and notice by the board. So thank you, Dr. Bussler, for your patience as we walked through it. I thought it was a very thoughtful process from both our interaction with you and amongst the board members. With that, Ms. Wood, would you call the roll on the motion to extend Dr. Bussler's contract through June 30th of 2019?
Mr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Maidson?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Mr. Uphoff?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. Raymond?
Yes.
Mr. Zak?
Yes, motion carries by unanimous 7-0 vote. And thanks to the board for really productive conversations over those 3 closed sessions. All right, moving on to discussion items, committee reports, policy, your meeting tomorrow, correct?
Correct, 4 o'clock.
Okay,
And that meeting will probably be very short, about an hour, I think.
great. Vision Steering Committee, Jeff?
We have not met since the last board meeting, and the March meeting has been canceled, so the next time we get together will be April 19th.
And I know you're out finalizing that agenda and
Yes.
talking about stuff. Great.
Steve?
Yep.
Just for information concerning the vision steering, the Environmental Task Force is ready to submit its paper to the Vision Steering Committee as the next step towards refining it and bringing it to the board. So whenever we have the next Vision Steering Committee, I think it's going to be in April, we'll be discussing that.
Great, thanks, and Jeff, make sure that's on the agenda.
Yep.
Look forward to seeing that, Dan. Great, information items, F, 2017-2018 capital projects, and Lanny, you got a short PowerPoint for us to present an update as to where we're going.
Randy, you gonna sing for us too?
No.
Okay.
I'll take my tuba for you, though, if you'd like.
You play tuba? That's awesome.
All right, pictures of our schools. I'm gonna stand over here out of the way. First school up is Brooklyn. We have some sidewalks and drainage issues that we're gonna try to correct. Some bathroom stalls that need to be replaced. You can see the water standing out in the playground area here, water standing in the sidewalk. We have water that's up against the building in here, and it needs to be corrected so we get the water away from the building and save the structure of the building.
Lenny, is that an issue that the village might be involved in as well?
The only issue that they'll be involved in is allowing us to dump the water into the retention basin, which is out in the northeast corner of the property.
Is any of this related to construction? Okay.
Another way, I have some blinds that are failing. We're going to replace those hopefully with what's called a roller shade. We have some in the high school right now and they're working quite well. We have some carpeting in 2 different locations that need to be replaced. Carpeting is very hard to keep clean, keep sanitary, and we don't have an awful lot of good luck with it. We propose to replace it with something that's similar to the floor that you're standing and sitting on right now. It's a product called Marmoleum. The district's been using for several years, and they're having very good luck with it. Our big project at NETHERWOOD is we have what we believe right now is what's called a belly in the sewer line in the hallway that runs from door number 4 out to door number 5, which goes over to the pool. We have had some significant issues trying to keep that line clear, and the only solution that we see right now is to break the floor up, find the sag, get the sag fixed so we have positive drainage going on. This is original to the building, 1950-some-year construction. The construction of the pipes is not like what it is today, and with settlement over the years, those pipes have a tendency to want to sag. So we need to correct that because obviously that's a significant issue. At Prairie View, we'd like to finish the last 2 sections of the roof in that building. That will complete the entire roof section. All the roof of that building will have been replaced. And right now it's 19 years old. Its useful life is about 20 years. It's been giving us some problems. And as you well know, leaking roofs don't pan out well when you've got kids in schools and buckets around trying to catch the water. So the last section will hopefully go on this summer, and that will put that building in probably a 25-year cycle to where we won't have any major issues with that other than perhaps a leak. But the new style roofing that we're putting on compared to the old rock ballasted roof, the totally adhered roofs are much more, what's the word I want? They're stronger, they last better, they take wear and abuse much better than the old style roof. We have some flooring to replace, and in order to do that, we need to fix these little cubbies that the children hang their coats up. After years and years of mopping and waxing the floor, the bottom of those, which you can't see, and I'm sorry about that, the bottom of those are beginning to curl and they look not very aesthetically pleasing. And we have a means of cutting them off in the middle and making a new design and getting that piece off the floor so we don't have that issue. That said, we have some hallway flooring which coincides with these 2 items that we'd like to replace. We've got several phases to do at Prairie View. One phase at a time. We're going to try to do 2 this year. Again, removing the waxable type flooring and going to something that's much more maintenance friendly, and we don't have the constant issues of trying to polish and wax the floors. It's especially difficult in Prairie View because it's so busy with summer school. We only have a week or so to get all the flooring done, and it just is very, very difficult to get done. Home Corners has some drainage issues on the outside. I'm sure you've probably seen the mud tracks around the west side of the roadway exiting from the student drop-off, as well as the pooling of water here. We've got some settlement of curb and gutter sections, and we need to replace those to get the water to flow into the catch basin. We have a water heater that's the booster heater for the kitchen dishwasher. It's original to the building, 2001. It needs to be replaced. There are 3 water heaters in that building. 2 have already been replaced. 1 catastrophically failed, and we had to do it unexpectedly. The second one, we planned for it in capital maintenance, and we'd like to do the same with this one. If this fails, the kitchen basically shut down, and that makes a very difficult
process to feed the children. The gym floor needs to be sanded, again, original to the building, 2001, it's never been sanded, it's been coated, but it hasn't been sanded, and then we've got some boards that are cracking and splintering. They're being held in place right now with the finish that goes on them, but we need to fix those boards and sand the whole entire gym floor and recoat it. So we propose to do that. The carpeting in the office, again, original to the building, 16 years old plus. It's tired, it's hard to keep clean, and we do have some individuals that have some allergy issues, and carpeting is a great place to grow allergy things, and so we'd like to get that out before we have any significant issues. Middle school, we have some sinks, again, original to the building, that need to be replaced in the science wings. The gymnasium and locker rooms do not have occupancy sensors for the lighting. We'd like to add that to that facility. This building has it, the high school has it, and several of our gymnasiums do. So after a few moments with no activity, the lights automatically turn off. Otherwise, they stay on all day long. And again, some bathroom stall partitions to replace. Simple, again, original to the building, and they're just tired and they need to be updated. The high school, one major project, is the repairing the cracks in the tennis courts. That's just an ongoing maintenance that we have to do, and we're going to meet this coming Friday and discuss some long-term plans and possibilities for the tennis courts to keep them in good condition. The security of the building, now we have an opportunity to rekey the building because such a major expansion to the building is going to be keyed differently. We'd like to bring the original part of the building up to the standards that we have today, get a handle on who has master keys, who doesn't have master keys, and get that really tightened up so we know who's coming and going into the building. And we'll know that with the card readers we have, but it also gives us a chance to bring those master keys under control and get a handle on as to who's carrying those and why they are. We have some blinds to replace as well, as we did in Netherwood. And we have a project called reglazing of the greenhouse. These are polycarbonate panels, and their useful life is about 10 years. They're 12 years old. We're starting to get some holes in them, which create ventilation issues, heating issues, rodent issues, and they need to be fixed. And so we propose to take care of that. Finally,
if I could just quick question on the security issue, when you talk about rekeying, are you talking about actually having physical keys or going more increasing
physical keys
to swipe? Or?
No, we've got the swipe cards that we're going to have in the locations that we want them to be right now, but this is for the keys, for the teachers to carry keys for their classroom or workrooms. And finally, we have a contingency in the district for $11,490. We have debt service for the middle school roof of $55,000, and the debt service for J.C. Park of $105,100. The roof at the middle school is a 10-year project. That was a $500,000 cost. The cost was $500,000. We've been paying that in $55,000 increments out of the capital budget. It will be paid for, I believe it is in 2018, 2019. And the contingency is just some leftovers that we had. We've got a couple ideas what we might do with that, but right now it's just holding a place to create the total of $600,000. I should have explained at the beginning, and I apologize for not doing so. The $600,000 comes from two sources. First of all, in 2008, there was a vote taken, and the voters of Oregon passed what's called a levy override, and that was $4 million. Became in effect in 2010. It will be done in 2019-20, if I remember correctly, and that $400,000 is set by the voters and approved by the voters, and that automatically comes. The other $200,000 comes from the general fund, typically approved by the board, which creates the total of $200,000 for our operations, repairs and maintenance. So that is it.
Anybody have any questions? I'll start over here. Charlie, you had one?
Yeah, no, I'm pleased to see that you're being proactive in terms of figuring out some of this stuff. My question, I guess, other question, with regard to flooring, are there other areas where you will be looking at replacing carpet with linoleum or something?
Yeah, we do, what we do is we ask all the principals, what's your list of wish list, give us the priorities. We rank those, and each year we try to do some flooring replacement to get to the memorial, to the memorial. In the middle school, or excuse me, in the grade schools, carpeting is especially difficult to take care of with the little tykes because of accidents and things like that. So what we do in those cases is we'll replace the room with marmoleum, but then we'll put a buy what's called a throw rug. And if that throw rug gets damaged or something where we can't take care of it, we simply load it up and buy a new one.
Are there problems with VOCs when you're doing new installation?
Not with marmoleum. It's a very low VOC product, virtually none at all. It costs a little more in the front, but in the long run, it's much cheaper than obviously waxing floors each year.
Thanks, Charlie.
Good. Looks good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jeff? Krista? Barb? Dan?
Yes, great presentation, and thanks for all the great work on this. I had a question I didn't quite understand. The the table that shows the project, the total budget, and then the budget variance, and that's the part that I don't really understand. Is that, usually when you see a budget variance?
It's a great question for Andy. Quite frankly, it's a question that, not a question, it's something he wanted in there to show if there was any differential in what the actual cost was. And I'm quite certain, to be honest with you, exactly how he uses that.
Okay.
I apologize.
So, this all, maybe this is a question for Andy too, but from what you said, we're looking at exactly $600,000 for all these projects that we talked about.
Correct.
Which is basically what we've got budgeted.
Correct.
Okay. So it's not that we're going way over budget, we need an extra $600,000 to do these things.
No, that's not. The 600 is the 600 is the 600.
Gotcha. And so this hopefully is, as far as you know, and surveying all the schools, all we're gonna need to do in 2017-18 as far as
capital projects. Now, that's not to say we can't have some catastrophic failure of something that we're not expecting. For example, last year we had a $17,000 water heater go up that wasn't in this budget and it wasn't in our general operating budget, and those kind of surprises hurt, and they can happen with the number of square feet we have and the amount of equipment that we have in these buildings. Anything can happen. We don't
that's what big
anticipate.
sales are for.
That's what, I'm sorry?
That's what big sales are for. I said.
There you go.
Or a contingency line item.
Right, correct.
We
So-
were 50,000 this year, I think.
You also talked about the district service office contingency of $11,490. That's separate from this $600,000. It's another budget item? Is
No,
that right?
it's inclusive. That's the contingency that I spoke to right here.
Okay, that's included in this 600,000?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll see it
Debt
right,
service though is separate,
you'll see right here.
or it's not?
DO 600, 11,490.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay.
And finally, I just wanted to ask and encourage by asking, were environmental concerns taken into account when deciding which materials to use, what types of repairs to do? For example, the partitions in the bathrooms, the pictures look like they're rusty.
Correct.
I know that you could make those kind of partitions out of recycled plastic, and I'm sure they're on the market. And they won't rust, and they use recycled plastic, which we need to build up the demand for, because plastic recycling sometimes ends up in the landfills anyway because they don't have a demand for the recycled plastic. So I want to encourage whenever...
We are using plastic, whether it's recycled plastic or not, I don't know, but I can find out. We've been putting plastic type partitions in since I got here. And I think it was even happening prior to my arrival. Because you're right, rusty metal ones just don't, but that's what they did when they built buildings and building records. Everything new referendum-wise is all plastic as well. And metal is the mounting clamps that actually fasten under the walls.
So for the value that we get out of perhaps a slightly higher price, might be worth it to use recycled plastic in order to consider the impact that we have on the environment. Another thing is with the roof replacement, lighter colored roof materials are better for the environment as we replace green, what would normally the sun shining on green areas does not create as much heat as it does when it shines on a black surface area, and it does cause heating up of the environment. So lighter colored roof materials. Was it considered that if we're going to do a roof replacement, and I can't imagine this is the entire roof of the school here.
No, it's
we're
not, it's just
talking
two
about,
sections.
because it's a lower price, and 170,000 is nothing to sneeze at, but it's not going to take care of the whole roof, I'm sure. But as we do that, if we do it in sections, are we looking at whether or not the new roof is going to possibly support any photovoltaic panels, or will it have the substructure? Do we want to consider whether we want to go that way in the future? If we're replacing part of the roof, maybe we want to think about, do we want to do it in a different way so that we can bring our schools up to be more environmentally friendly in the future, if we have future budgets for
I
that.
understand that, sir. For an example, explanation, we did not do that with this roof. We're simply replacing the roof. We're not doing any structural integrity of the building, no superstructure to hold anything, to support anything. It's simply taking the roof panels off down to the tin, that new insulation, putting the roof back on again. So it's basically just the roof section itself, nothing structurally to hold any weight other than the roof itself.
Gotcha.
And the snow load required by the code.
Okay. And this is just for my information and just as an encouragement for the future to consider these kind of things. I do want to say it's wonderful and beautiful that these light sensors in the locker rooms and the gyms sound like they're going to save us a lot of energy, or potentially save us a lot of energy by not having the lights on when nobody is in there. And I think we're doing that throughout the district as we're upgrading. So we are actually very good in this district on use of electricity because of things like this. So
Right.
I think that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Just two comments. One is on the spreadsheet we got. I interpret the budget variance column to be just a spreadsheet function that we've got the total project and the amount spent will get filled in as they complete the project, and then there's just a function of how much spent in relation to the total project, and we get remaining budget. So that's kind of how I read that. And my second comment is to thank the taxpayers of the District of Oregon. We're on the second referendum funding of $400,000 for capital maintenance projects, and because our taxpayers have been so willing to provide us with a set-aside dollar amount for capital maintenance, we've been able to stay on top of those items in the district, and in the long run, that's more cost effective than having to replace them on the fly, and it reflects in the quality of our buildings. So thanks very much to the district residents, and thank you, Lanny, for all the work you've done and for the presentation this evening to let us know what you're going to be doing. It was really interesting.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. That takes us to the math curriculum update. Leslie, I'm assuming that's you?
You're correct.
Okay, come and join us. Just a note that as Dr. Bergstrom's setting this up, that in our new space, we'll have this connect up with the computers, but we won't have a bulky little
Scrap some notes.
screen there. We'll be projecting these on large flat screen TVs that will be viewable by board members and the audience, but it'll also project out through cable wall as well, so it's going to be a cool design.
It'll make it much easier on everybody's. That's great. There we go. So this is just a very brief update for you tonight on the fact that our 612 teachers in math have conducted a program review, and there are some things that will be changing next year, and we're in the process of deciding what exactly will be changed. So we started this process a year ago, and it was at the urging of the teachers. They knew what we had done as far as the process we had used in selecting Bridges, our K-5 elementary program. And they wanted to go through the same sort of rigorous and thoughtful system in order to examine what they were currently doing and to ensure that they were using the best tools to be able to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish as far as helping our kids grow into math learners. So when we started the process, we once again engaged Michelle Parks out of CESA 5. I'll get to that in just a minute. But we also started, along in partnership with her, making sure that when we were making any decisions and as we move forward, that we were not only keeping in mind our values as a district, but also the high school's theory of action and how the math department would contribute to what the high school was doing regarding its theory of action. And how could the selection of new curriculum potentially help it do that job even better. So as I said, the selection process was modeled very much after what we did with Bridges because that had worked so successfully for us. So we hired Michelle Parks to come and do some facilitation with us. Over the course of the last year, the teachers in grades 6 through 12 have had 6 full days of work on deciding basically what it is they believed about mathematics instruction, creating a rubric based on their beliefs and research, learning some even more about the mathematical standards of practice. And you can see some of the topics that we delved into during those 6 days. Depth of knowledge and task analysis, because I'll show you a graphic that helps everyone understand that it's really about the tasks that students are asked to do. Development of learning targets, which we know from the work of John Hattie is one of the most important things that we can do for students in their learning. The difference between difficulty and complexity, and how we were searching for math tasks that have a level of complexity, not just difficulty. And how to develop low floor, high ceiling tasks so that everyone in the classroom is able to access what they're doing. So this, as you can imagine, took quite a bit of time. And as I said, it was grades 6 through 12. And they developed a rubric, and they developed a vision, and they eventually narrowed it down to 3 different curriculums. But throughout that process, as I mentioned, there was a lot of really deep and important work. They spoke about the standards of practice, which are the 8 things along the side here. But even more importantly, how do those standards of practice result in a shift in classroom practice? So each of those things was examined very thoroughly by the math team. And this wasn't something that was new necessarily, but it was something that they were prepared as a group to make a commitment to. These particular graphics, I'm sorry if the blue makes it a little difficult to see, but once again, they were graphics that Michelle used to, actually it's the same one accidentally, to help the teachers understand the task as the interplay of the content, the teacher, and the student, and developing complex tasks that are low floor, high ceiling, meaning they can be accessed from students and a wide spectrum of knowledge base. How to devise that, how to look for that, how to make that a central point of the curriculum they were searching for. Well, as you can imagine, we set the bar very, very high as far as what we wanted. And we spoke a little bit about what our dream was for mathematics instruction. And this was a 6 through 12 group, and they came up with belief statements on instructional design, classroom culture, and what they believe students should have as far as opportunities. And that dream, which was of course, grounded in the values and the theory of action, fueled their process and the development of a rubric. Now, it wasn't as if they just developed this rubric based off just what they thought. They of course used what they knew from research and what rubrics were already out there. But then they developed a rubric to evaluate all of the math programs they were interested in according to content, organization and structure, student experience, and a variety of other factors that were really critical to them. And if you were able to look closely at the rubric, you'll see something like mathematical content has, 7 different areas that they needed to look at. So it was complex work they put a lot of time into, not just those 6 days. This was nights and weekends also. They came up with 3 different finalists. CMP, or CPM, excuse me. It's really easy to get that mixed up, as I'm sure you know, because we already use a curriculum called CMP in grades 6 through 8, right? The curriculum they're interested in is called CPM. That will be a tough one for me to get used to as time goes on. But it was developed by a California nonprofit. It was adopted by the entire state of California, and now it's being used by several districts in the area. Some Prairie, DeForest, Middleton are examples of CPM being used at the high school level. There is also a CPM at the middle school level. So the middle school teachers were a part of this whole process. And as we discussed what our vision was for mathematics instruction, what they said was what we're already doing with CMP, that's already what you're talking about. So if we are making a shift in how we do things, then really what we're already using does the job. The only thing we need to think about is what we give up by giving up CMP, is that more or less important than what we gain by making sure we're using the same curriculum from 6 through 12. So 6 through 8 stepped out of the process and said, we will reevaluate once you make your decision. So CPM was one of our finalists, Eureka was one of our finalists, and that was developed by a nonprofit called Great Minds, and it's also been adopted by the entire state of New York. As a matter of fact, it was originally referred to as a curriculum called Engage New York. And then finally, the third finalist was Go Math, which was developed by, or the publisher is Houghton Mifflin. So it's the only one that was not developed by a nonprofit. Which interestingly, Bridges was developed by a group of teachers that put together a company. I don't know if they would call themselves at this point nonprofit, but it was a teacher-developed company, not a large publisher. So, through the use of the rubric, they were able to get down to three math programs. And then at our last in-service on February 28th, we worked as a group through a pretty heavily structured process to bring it down to 2 finalists. And those 2 finalists, as you see in blue, are CPM and Eureka. So, where do we go from here? Well, we are visiting schools that are currently implementing those curriculums. And the teachers are very, very reluctant to leave the classroom. So they are actually doing their visits on spring break. A group of teachers are going to Some Prairie on March 27th. And then there aren't a lot of area districts, or there aren't any area districts currently using Eureka. So they are visiting North Green, Illinois over spring break also. And then the teachers who are unable to visit because they're out of town during that time, they will be looking at CPM at another local district that we're still deciding upon. Each of the remaining curriculums will offer vendor presentations where they'll talk about the philosophical underpinnings of their curriculum, as well as the type of support they would offer the teachers related to professional development implementation. And then we'll make our selection on April 7th. This will be a multi-year rollout. So next year would just be a change in algebra. The following year would be a change of geometry, and a year after that would be a change in Algebra 2. So it would take us 3 years to be fully implemented, but we decided that since there are several teachers who teach at least 2 of those, that we wanted to make sure we made it very manageable. So as far as what to expect, we expect the courses will remain, and the traditional sequence will remain the same. So, algebra is still algebra, geometry is still geometry. They'll just be using a different tool to help kids really hone in on those mathematical standards of practice. There will be more focus on productive struggle and collaborative problem solving. And one of the main purposes is that there's going to be stronger connections to bridges and CMP, thereby better preparing our learners for success in high school math and beyond. So, a very long process to get us where we are today, and we have not made the selection. There's still quite a bit to go, including not only the selection, but then the teacher training that goes into using a new curriculum. So that's just a little FYI, so you know that change is around the corner. Yes, sir?
Sure.
Leslie, as you know, obviously, mathematics has a lot of impact in many areas of our lives. I'm particularly interested in applied mathematics in terms of how students are provided with opportunities to utilize what they're learning in terms of math theory, everything from balancing checkbooks to calculating arcs. I mean, there are a whole range of issues that I think these opportunities for learning are probably best when they actually have a chance to apply and use what they're learning in theory to some practical applications. I'm just wondering, you might talk a little bit in terms of what we're currently doing with regard to applied math.
Well, honestly, that's one of the reasons that they were interested in looking at a new curriculum. Not more so for basic skills related to financial literacy, like checkbook balancing, et cetera, but more about how to use what they were learning procedurally in a way that will allow them to get a greater understanding of the general, the concepts and their use and their application.
Are we dealing with quantum mechanics?
No, probably not. But are these curriculums specifically honed in on helping students not just learn the algorithm, but apply it in a way that's relevant to their life or could be relevant to their life? Yes, that's one of the reasons that we went in this direction.
Great. Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about the elementary math in terms of, and the reason why I ask this, and I do it with all due respect, is I was out in the, at a small business in town here, and the gentleman who owned the business said, please send us people that know how to make change for working, and some of the things, we ended up in a long conversation about estimations of money and making change and math facts. So how does that apply, or does it apply to like elementary math?
Oh, it absolutely does, because one of the things that makes Bridges, I think, a really smart selection is the fact that it's helping students develop this foundational numeracy that includes flexible thinking about math, which means, yes, they should be memorizing their facts, but they should also be able to think flexibly about their facts. For instance, instead of memorizing all your multiplication tables on 4s and 6s, you memorize 5s and learn to add and subtract on either side.
Right, okay.
So it's being able to think mathematically. That is one of the hallmarks of this program, and we're so excited by what we're seeing happening in the classroom, and we can't wait to see what mathematical thinking will look like for our kids after they've been in the program for several years in a row.
So it sounds like it's a balance of some of the traditional with some of this more holistic thinking of math at a younger age.
There's a little more on not memorizing, on having quick recall with your facts.
Right.
There's a little more to that in this than there was in everyday math.
That's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing, as long as they can think flexibly about numbers.
Right.
And it's not just a memorization trick.
Is this something, I wouldn't say new, but a different approach in terms of, math facts? I had a difficult time learning my math facts, but they've come, of course, as an adult, they come in incredibly handy, and as well as a School of Hope tutor, the young man that I was working with, he had so much trouble with pre-algebra because he didn't know his math facts. And, you know, so is this a shift in how we approach that?
A little bit, yes.
Oh, good, thank you. I'll go back and tell the guy.
Thanks, Glenn. Jeff?
Leslie, is 6 through 12 on the same curriculum now or not?
No,
No?
completely different. As a matter of fact, how students are learning math through grade 8 changes fairly abruptly once they start high school, and it becomes a much more traditional focus. And it's not as if everything that's associated with the traditional is negative. It certainly isn't. It serves some students very, very well. We just want to be able to also integrate some problem solving and some real life examples into their mathematics curriculum.
So that kind of leads into my second question, which is, how was it decided that a new curriculum was needed?
Well, part of it is just responsible review. You know, every so often, to be responsible, we should be looking at what else is out there to ensure we're really using the right tool. And secondly, it's really about our commitment to helping students with the mathematical standards of practice and making sure that it's they're not just learning algorithms, but they're learning to be mathematical thinkers. I'll go back to that for a second. Make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. Reason abstractly and quantitatively. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. I mean, that's just the first three. So they wanted to make sure that whatever curriculum they were using as their main tool really emphasized that kind of thinking.
And then last question is, Bridges is K through 5. Do all the elementary curricula tend to be K through 5? I'm just wondering if there are any issues with RCI being split, you know, having two curricula at one school.
They have since, I think it's been about 8 years now that they've had two curriculums. Because everyday math, my first year at RCI, everyday math was through grade 6. And then the 6th grade teachers said that they really felt like CMP was a better middle level curriculum and had more rigor than everyday math for grade 6. And so after my first year there, they made the switch, and they've been split ever since.
And they didn't think 5th grade, they didn't think CMP would be appropriate for 5th grade?
As a matter of fact, it's only 6 through 8. So it can't, CMP can't go down.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You bet.
Krista?
A couple things. One, with the new curricula, are there technology programs that would be new? I mean, you know, because I know Alex or some of those that are being used right now, do these new curriculum have, do they work with some of the technological programs we have, or are they different, or how does that go with some of these?
Yes, they could. Usually these programs come with a technology aspect to them. Sometimes even for instance, in Eureka, the whole curriculum can also be online. You can have it be a completely online curriculum, or you can purchase materials. At this point, we're probably still looking at using books and supplementing with technology and not having technology be the entire curriculum. There's an awful lot of kids who still like to work things out on paper and pencil. So we're probably not going in that direction right now, but we're making sure that the possibility is there for the future.
Then my other question is, I mean, if you look at our assessment data, we tend to be a pretty well-performing mathematical district. So is there a goal you have in mind or a result that you're looking to move to by going to these curriculum, or is it more classroom practice, or I guess what's the goal, or is there a measurable that will say, okay, this is going to be the right move, or this is where we want to go?
I think that's an excellent question, because you're right, as far as math goes, we're already very high performing, and we certainly intend to continue to stay that way. But we also want to expand on thinking, not just on getting the right answer, but on the mathematical thinking that's behind it. And that is the type of thing that usually is not assessed in a state assessment, or even the ACT for that matter. So it would be very hard for us to look at any of our usual measurements and say whether or not we're improving students' mathematical thinking. That would probably be more regarding in-class assessments, where we'd be able to take a look and see how we're making progress on that.
And I guess my final question too, do we feel like these curriculum are going to meet the ends of the spectrum in terms of advanced learners and kids that maybe need, or maybe more challenged by math?
Absolutely. There's always a concern when you're talking about something that includes a lot of problem solving regarding the reading component. So we have been talking about that quite a bit. And really what we're also making sure we understand is that there's no curriculum that will help us meet the needs of every student. The curriculum is only one tool, and people will still have to utilize other tools to ensure that we're creating, as what I mentioned before, mathematical tasks that are low floor, high ceiling.
Great, thanks. Barb?
So, the high school is gonna make their decision, and then based on that,
We'll go back to the middle schools area and talk to them about what they see as advantages.
okay, so is one
Disadvantages.
option that they will stick with what they've got with CMP, or is it CPM? Whatever.
They have CMP.
And is it possible they'll decide to stick with that?
It is. It is because what they've noticed is that even if we select Bridges, CMP, and CPM, there is still a philosophical alignment. So students aren't jumping from one really different approach to another. Things are building upon one upon another. However, we'd have to be really careful about language usage and not really confusing students by switching our language when we switch programs.
Sure, sure. And then, the teacher in service, this will happen on days that have already been set aside, basically?
Yeah. As an example, I've heard that CPM offers more than a week of training and recommends more than a week of training as part of your preparation and part of your purchase. Consequently, the teachers who are teaching algebra next year may be developing might be a part of a highly effective practices sequence where the first year, most of their in-service time is spent in delving into the implementation of the new curriculum.
And that would happen here? Or would
Yeah,
they go
they'd summon someone here.
And then this is, I don't know, maybe a question you can't answer, but do we have any tools to assess how students are actually feeling about their success in math, or do you think that their feeling correlates with their scores? I
That's a
guess,
great
so many
question.
people have kind of a math aversion,
Yes.
because there's been a lot of poor math instruction. I'm talking, my generation.
Right. No, it's not. It's very common, unfortunately. And I've been in enough parent-teacher conferences that have started with, I never liked math either.
Yeah.
So I know that it is pretty pervasive. And, I often think that feeling a level of success is what will help our students move past any aversion that they may be taking on. And what I feel really encouraged by are the things that I see with Bridges in the lower levels right now. Because, for example, I was in a kindergarten classroom last week where they were doing a lesson on shapes. And they were in kindergarten, so they were 5 or 6 years old. But they were using the same vocabulary that you would use in math when you are in 5th grade or 6th grade. So one little boy came up to me and said, I'm very smart because I can close my eyes and feel a shape and know what it is because of its attributes. And I said, well, you just made my Thursday. Thank you very much. But it's about helping students from a very early age feel comfortable, see the fun in it. Because, in Bridges, they do workstations which are math games that are carefully selected to reinforce the concepts that we want them to understand. And so if you're spending a good part of your math time playing games without even necessarily realizing how much you're learning, I'm hoping we're slowly able to, make an indent on how some people have felt about math for many years.
Thanks, Barb. Dan?
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad that we're continuing to look at different curricula. Was not happy with everyday math. Some people liked it, but my kids didn't, and I didn't really like helping them with it. Two basic questions. The application of the curriculum to life should be an important thing, and I'm sure it's one of the things that you looked at. Specifically, I'm concerned about environmental education objectives and activities that might be included in this curriculum, as is mandated by the Wisconsin Administrative Code. Not a focus in math. Math is not one of the focus areas where environmental education objectives and activities is a focus in the administrative code, but they do say throughout the curriculum, K through 12 objectives should be included in all curriculum. Was that something that you looked at? Is there any particular environmental education objectives and activities in any of these?
Selection of this?
In any of these?
No, that is not something we looked at because once you have the curriculum, you're able to use it to build the tasks. So we could use the curriculum to build tasks that have a focus of whatever it is that we selected, whether it's global competencies or environmental education. We can build tasks around those. We were just looking for the best tool to help us do that. And so, no, we didn't necessarily look at the curriculum through that lens because we know that we have the ability to shape how the curriculum is used.
And my other question is concerning the switchover, if there is a switchover, and maybe this is just my lack of understanding about the sequence in which students take this, but if you've got somebody doing algebra in the first year it switched over, would they be able to take Algebra 2 in the next year? So then they're not going to get the new curriculum and it's going to be a jump forward and then back again? If they do algebra in the first year and Algebra 2 in the second year, or then the third year as a switch, instead of doing them in the sequence that a child might take those classes, and what was the thought about that?
Well, most of our students go from algebra to geometry. So there are only a very small number of students who double up and try to take geometry and algebra 2 at the same time. And we haven't really spoken about that group of kiddos yet because it is such a small number and it isn't necessarily something that we recommend people do, because that is an awful lot of complex math instruction when they have all kinds of other complex and courses happening at the same time. So if a student found him or herself in that situation, we would probably look at it on an individual basis. For instance, would it be beneficial for that student to have access to the new curriculum online as a supplement to what they were experiencing in their other curriculum? I'm not sure how we would approach it. We would probably look at the individuals involved and try to make a good decision. But it's a very small number of kids because it isn't something that we necessarily encourage students to do.
So, and you know more about this than I do, but perhaps this is a thought that you hadn't thought of, that perhaps geometry is less related to algebra than it is to, then Algebra 2 is related to algebra, and perhaps maybe geometry could be the third year of a change, and that wouldn't be such a jarring change for a student that's going to take Algebra 1 year and Algebra 2 the next year. I was personally a student that took pre-calc and calc in high school in the same year just because I didn't get started, and I was in a parochial school until the 9th grade, so I wasn't able to take algebra in the 8th grade as a lot of other students did, so I had to catch up one of those years. So just something to think about if the curriculum is going to change. Yeah, and what's going to affect the kids the least that might end up doing that.
Charlie, you have another?
Yeah, quick question. When we're testing proficiency, I can remember taking those tests when they had a lot of things where you show your work.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering to what extent that, because you talked a little bit about not just getting the right answer, but also it's the thought process. And so I'm wondering to what extent that is integrated in the testing of the program, so we really get a better handle on level of understanding there actually is in terms of what's happening with calculation.
Well, it's not only right now just show your work, it's also write your work out. So the kids not only often have to show what they did mathematically, but they also have to explain in writing. Not for every single problem, but the ability to explain your thinking in writing is one of the things that is a part of the standards we're using, and we really work hard on that.
One of the things that brings to mind is whether we are or have considered involving students actually in teaching what they're learning. Because often it's the process of explaining to someone else or teaching something that we really have
Understand
to
things
understand.
best, yes,
And so I'm
absolutely.
just wondering, perhaps with younger students or with pairing up, there might be some opportunities to encourage that kind of involvement.
Encourage some teaching of peers.
Yeah.
Recently I heard that some of the neuroscience in learning mathematics is very individualized, and like some people can't actually understand mathematics until they're in their 20s. And do these new curricula, particularly at the high school level, do they take that into consideration too? And what do we do with I didn't understand mathematics until I was in my 20s, and I find it extremely fascinating, but not in my teens.
I think that especially with the 3 credits as opposed to 2 that are not required for graduation, there are a lot of students that maybe traditionally would have stopped at the 2 who now need to go forward. And of course our goal is to have every student at minimum through Algebra 2, but there are some students who, for lots of reasons, and some of them may be just that they're not developmentally ready for that type of thinking, are looking for a different 3rd credit. And so we do offer some things that could help our students in that area. But our goal really is to provide the support and scaffold so that 99% of our students can get through Algebra 2.
And do they teach students in our district that, like algebra is actually logic? I mean, because if you study logic from a different viewpoint using just words, it's all of the, communicative properties and stuff like that.
Yes. I think our teachers are very appreciative of the beauty of mathematics.
Yes.
And so the math as logic, I'm sure, is a part of what they're doing
And
all the time.
I think back in the 70s that element was missing. It was more about
Memorization of algorithms.
and teaching for the answer. So it sounds good, thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. I was looking forward to hearing about our Bridge to Bridges, and doing that. At some point, we'd like to hear what the experience has been like with Bridges.
That's great,
Okay,
yeah.
Your first year look back on that
Absolutely.
and
Maybe
how
have a
that's
teacher
going.
come in and maybe even a student or.
Yep, yep. I mean, because it's a program that's starting to be implemented more widely, and one of the things I've heard around the county is that, the success of it depends on how much support the teachers have in moving through and working through the whole new process of developing the curriculum for it.
I agree, and I think that's one of the reasons why we've had a very successful first year is we had 2 math coaches, and they've made a big difference.
I've heard that, and I've heard that from other districts, that's critical. So it would be interesting to hear when you have compiled some
Great.
anecdotal and data feedback for us to see how that goes. Brian,
Sure.
a question for you. When we make the choice on curriculum, I think that has to be board approved or not?
No, as far as I know.
Okay. Well,
When we made the Bridges recommendation, the Bridges recommendation is really faculty based, but
Yeah.
if you, we have not brought those, but if you want those
Yeah.
brought, that's,
I just asked because I didn't know the answer.
okay.
So, on that.
We always want to keep you informed.
Yeah,
No surprises.
yeah. And Leslie, I assume that the platform, whatever we choose, would lend itself to a project-based type learning,
Yes,
particular. It sounds like it.
that's the direction we want to go.
Okay. And my last comment is that when we were doing when board members were doing advocacy work for the referendum, for the teacher comp, one of the things that was, challenge is maybe not the right word, but one of the goals was to educate our public as to the sophistication of teaching these days, and what all is involved, and it's through reports like this that I hope we get that sense out there that our staff is doing amazing things, that they're thinking deep and critically and directly tied to our mission. So the more you can, if you think of, you know, what's going on and do short reports to us on the board, I think that not only informs us, but informs the public. So really appreciated the report. It was really good.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. F3, Superintendent's Report. Brian?
Just a couple of really quick things. I know several of you had the opportunity to participate in the board tour last week at the high school. I think based on comments that you made while we were on the tour, you were very pleasantly connected with the project that's been up and running since second semester, our two-story academic wing, and all the progress that's been made in the physical education wing along with the high school office and principal's office area. So we will do one of those tours again, and if you didn't have an opportunity to make it this last time and you'd like to go, just let Andy or me know and we will take you. Second thing, March 15th is the date that we will hear, and I didn't talk to Janie today. Have we heard from Albany School District? Have they filed their DPI?
We got a letter from DPI today, and because they did not submit it until February 1st, it has to be in prior to February 1st. So it sounds like they're not going to let them appeal it.
Ah, well, we won't have a boundary appeal hearing at DPI. I would predict we'll have a boundary appeal hearing in April of 2018. Next item, Youth Sports Task Force. Last week I met with Krista and with Mike, and we are in the process of finalizing that Youth Sports Task Force, and the first meeting likely will be in April. And Population and Growth Task Force, I visited with Leslie, and the Population and Growth Task Force has had one meeting. They're planning another meeting before spring break, and Mark Roffers, the urban and regional planner that we're working with, he is starting to complete the subdivision development plans that will lead to the enrollment projections. So he should have that completed sometime this summer. And then I heard from Dan tonight that the environmental task force is a thumbs up to get to the vision committee in April. And then the last item I have last Saturday morning. Mark Getz, one of our new teachers, he's at RCI, and he's taking a graduate class through the Turbo, and the teacher of the graduate class is a good friend of mine, the superintendent in Middleton Cross Plains. So I was invited to the class by Mark, and I had an opportunity to visit with about 25 Turbo students working on their master's degree, and they were asking questions about what we look for in principal hires. So had an opportunity to network with a number of people and to help Mark out with his class. And that's probably the last time I've eaten solid food. It was breakfast of 2 days ago. So I'm looking forward to some solid food tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Janie had put at your place future agenda for April 10th, which will be our last meeting of this board. And there will be because of that, Charlie will be leaving the board, and so we're going to have a little cake, a thank you reception, Charlie, for you. So you have to let Janie know what kind of cake you want.
I already know his
All
favorite
right.
kind.
Okay. So that will be at 6 p.m.
So,
for our recognition, and then we're going to have a special district meeting that night, starting at 6:30 to purchase real estate. And we have to do that by law, so we have to call a special meeting as part of our regular meeting. So that will be on there. And then it's the time of year to issue contracts, so we've got those as action items for our employees, and an election update, and that's all we have right there. We gotta work, and we'll probably hold over the committee of the whole work on the budget until then, when Andy's back. And that's how, when Brian and I talked, we thought we would use the committee of the whole process for working on the budget this year, and try to see how that works. So that's the agenda for April 10th. Anybody have any additional items that they would like placed on? Okay, good, and that leads us to checkout, and I'll start down at this end. Dan?
I have nothing, thanks.
Okay, Barb.
Nothing tonight.
Krista?
I have two things, since it's math night.
Yeah.
I don't know if people got this because maybe they don't have kids in school, but our 5th and 6th grade and 7th and 8th grade math, they had special teams that went to the math meet, and they both placed first in our conference or district. So they'll be going on to the state math meet. So we report a lot about extracurriculars and things, but when we have math teams, that's pretty cool too. And then the other thing is, just an observation, high school had parent-teacher conferences last week, and it's really amazing to me to see all the parents that come. And, you know, as I talk with parents, or I have my own conferences, how thoughtful the teachers are about discussions about your kids and how they're doing and what they're like as individuals. And it's really a worthwhile experience, and I think our district does a really good job with parent-teacher conferences.
So Dan, if you'd relay that to your folks,
absolutely.
Thank you.
Tomorrow's Pie Day.
It is,
Well,
yes.
then you have to-
We should have
Yeah. Jeff?
Just another shout out to the mock trial team. State competition was this last weekend. They won 3 of their 4 matches. So another successful year. Congratulations, Mr. Towns and the team. And Kim Gehrman took home a Best Lawyer Award. So congratulations, sir.
Wow, terrific. Great. Charlie?
Yeah, I want to just give a brief report on a field trip. This past Tuesday, I went with 4 students from high school to the Capitol, and we had meetings with staff from a number of people at Capitol. We represented Rowing, we met with staff for Senator Urbanbach, and then we had about a 45-minute session with staff for Representative Joel Kitchens, who was going to be in charge of a task force on funding for public education. And the kids were really impressive. Very encouraged by that. And one of the outcomes of that meeting was a request on the part of students. They're apparently interested in forming a club dealing with all things political. So, and government and that sort of issue. A very impressive group of young people.
Great. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Yep.
I would maybe just follow up on that. You mentioned earlier, Howard Swamico has a thing in place where they have all of their school board members adopt a legislator. That is to try to one-on-one connection with individual legislators to keep them up to date. Something I would like to encourage this board to consider, to perhaps involve more members of the school board in developing some contacts and some relationships with members of the legislature that are going to have a significant impact on the future for public education. So.
Thanks, Charlie. Gwen?
I'm looking forward to Tuesday and Thursday of this week. I'll be participating in Pioneer Days down in Brooklyn. And it's always so exciting because the kids are all charged up, and dusting off my spinning wheel, which was really high tech a long time ago. And they are fascinated with that, and it's just a good time. And I want to thank Brooklyn for inviting me again.
I've got a couple things. 2 of our graduates from last year, Maddie LeBrun and Chris Cutter, placed in the Division III National Track Meet. So that's quite an accomplishment for them. So terrific. Good job to those guys. And on March 3rd, Brooklyn Elementary did a 4th grade performance of Alice in Wonderland. And that's been rehearsing after school, kids on their own time, and it involved about probably 40 to 50 kids, and then parent volunteers, and staff members, and the PTO funded the bus ride for the entire school to come up to the PAC that Friday afternoon at 1 to see their classmates in the place. So thank you to the Brooklyn PTO for doing that. It was the kids were really charged up, and then they had a performance at 6:30 on Friday night to a packed auditorium, and it was just delightful. So good job. Arts in the school is a wonderful thing, and you see how many kids were involved with that. It was great. And I talked to Katie Monk, she oversees the PAC, and she's thrilled by the new digital light and soundboards that we have, and the ability to teach the tech crew at the high school on the digital boards is amazing. And that play was done tech-wise by students who were learning the board. So it's just another life experience that was afforded because people were involved in that. And then, just on a personal note, because of the fire at the high school, the straw hat players cannot do their performance this summer in the auditorium, and Andy's been really good in working with the leadership there because they have to take the insulation out, so they've had to cancel their show. But we've got a new show, and for some reason I decided to agree to produce that show, and it'll be not like I have a lot of time, but so watch out, because we're looking for, we're gonna have a new venue, but it's Sondheim on Sondheim, which is a great show that is sort of a memoir of all the stuff that Stephen Sondheim has done. It's a great show. I don't know if you know it very well. It's terrific, and we'll have 6 shows that will seat about 100 to 120. We're looking at some dinner theater type of options, so stay tuned. It's a fabulous show. If you hear me humming at board meeting.
Quick update on the status of the fire and where they're at.
We'll get you that out in between and let you know. So, okay, we're gonna skip the board committee on the whole, so Brian can go home and get well. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Dan with the motion, is a second. Jeff with the second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, everyone, we'll see you April 10th. Have a great break.
It's all.